Eric, I propose that we take a week to think about this. We'll reconvene on the next pod.
Well, we can't do that because that's going to be in like 5 hours.
Yeah, we're recording twice today. So 2 pods from now.
Well, no, but I know for us it's 5 hours, but for them it's a week.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat The Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved when we were growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you know what Blockbuster Video is? If you answered yes, and this is the podcast for you, I am one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me are my co-hosts, Ash Vladimir Marolla.
Hi, y'all.
And Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And each week we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. The movies we cover are chosen by you, the listeners, who generously commission the films you love. If you'd like to see all the movies we have covered, will cover, or want to choose one for yourself, please visit shatpod.com and have a look. At the end of each podcast, we'll provide you, the audience, with the number of wipes each movie would take to get off your respective butts. So thank you so much for listening. If you have not already, hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. That's how we help the podcast grow. Additionally, subscribe to our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, Lovecraft Country, and Watchmen. Find all the information and past episodes at shatpod.com/TV. And finally, to hang out with us live, follow and subscribe to our Twitch channel, shatpod.com/Twitch, where we play video games, host watch parties, and edit this podcast live. All that being said, Big D, what movie are we reviewing today?
Gene, tonight's a very special night for me. One of our listeners, David K., who is a fellow New Yorker and a fellow guy who grew up in Westchester, he has commissioned a film, and he wrote in. He grew up in Edgemont. He went to Sal's Pizza, which is a big restaurant on Mamaroneck Avenue in Mamaroneck. It's been there years. It's on top like pizza lists across the country. He would go to Walter's hot dog stand. So he shares a lot of the same memories I have growing up. I'm curious to hear how old he is, because we may have played each other in school, because our high schools play. And I was even more excited when he wrote in and said, please, can you guys go all the way back to 1981 and review the comedy film, Arthur?
I wrote in and said, Shat team, I continue to love the podcast. Thanks for all the entertainment and interesting insights into so many of my favorite movies and some of my not so favorite movies. One of my favorite movies of all time and my favorite comedy is Arthur, starring Dudley Moore, John Gielgud, and Liza Minnelli. This movie has it all. Beyond some of the funniest lines ever written, it has heart. Arthur is a guy who seemingly has it all, but yet his life is empty because he's not yet found true love. He is wealthy beyond imagination and certainly tries to enjoy his money, but he didn't earn it, and so he doesn't feel he deserves it. He doesn't even appear to have any friends other than his butler, Hobson. To make matters even worse, his family is forcing him into a loveless marriage under the threat of cutting him off from his money. In short, Arthur drinks himself into oblivion and philanders every night because he has no self-worth. He also has no say in the one thing he can't buy and which could bring him happiness, which is true love. This movie offers a deep lesson. Money can't buy happiness, and does this without preaching and with side-splitting dry humor. I remember seeing Arthur in the theater with my parents, Big D, I think it was at Movieland in Yonkers, when I was 13, and loving Arthur and Hobson, quoting so many lines which still make me laugh to this day, and rooting for him to end up with Linda. I'm not going to tell you that money can't buy you happiness moral of the movie was fully appreciated at that age. I kept watching it primarily because it made me laugh. However, as I matured, I kept peeling the onion and developed a much deeper understanding of the moral as well as the complexity of Arthur and Hobson's characters. I look forward to your review. Regards, David K.
So now doing the math, I know that David is older than I am, because I would have been 8 when this came out, so he was 13, so we did not play each other. But David, I do remember seeing Dusk Till Dawn in that Yonkers movie land.
I know David is in his 50s because he used the word philanders.
That was a giveaway, yes.
Well, Arthur is a 1981 romantic comedy written and directed by Steve Gordon. It stars Dudley Moore as Arthur Bach, a drunken millionaire who is on the brink of an arranged marriage to a wealthy heiress, but ends up falling for a working-class girl from Queens. It was the sole film directed by Gordon, who died in 1982 of a heart attack at age 44. The film earned over $95 million domestically, making it the 4th highest-grossing film of 1981, and its title song, Arthur's Theme, won the Academy Award for Best Original Song. So Big D, Ash, we always ask where you were and what your memories are of the movie we're covering. Today it is Arthur. Big D, let's start with you.
So this is a strange experience. I remember seeing this in the theater when I was 8, but then this also might be a false memory. I'm confident that Arthur is the film that I convinced my grandmother to go see when I then tricked her into seeing So Fine, the movie I've talked about before, about a guy who invents jeans with no ass cheeks. And I tricked my grandmother into taking me as an 8-year-old to see this. She was disgusted and walked out. I'm convinced it was this, but doing research, the math doesn't line up because So Fine was September of 81. Arthur was July. So at this point, my memory is not reliable enough to state where I was. And I want to make sure I'm at least, there's some continuity between the stories I've told before because I don't know. But either way, seeing this in the theater, which I'm confident I did, it was inappropriate for this age.
I've talked before about how when we were kids, parents didn't give a shit what you wanted to see. They took you what they wanted to see. And this is a fine example of that because my family was very into Arthur and therefore I watched it too. When we first moved to Arizona in 82, we were homesick for our lives in Queens. Like we moved out here and realized you couldn't walk to the grocery store, that the tallest building was only like 3 stories high near us. And it was a real bummer. So we would watch movies, any movie that featured the sights and sounds and feel of New York City. And so Arthur was a very popular movie rental in our household. It was one of those that you might see like 2 or 3 times a month on separate rentals.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I guess I'm a true child of the 80s because I do that to my children as well. Like this weekend, my parents are in town for Halloween. They come in town every year and we've been watching what we want to watch. And if the kids are too scared, they just like leave the room because like we don't just watch like Hocus Pocus in our household. And so I was telling my parents about that and my mom was like, oh, I love Arthur. Because usually, unless it's Last of the Mohicans, she's not a fan of the movies we review. And this is a movie they loved apparently when I was a kid, but I never saw it. I don't know how it happened, but I have seen the Russell Brand version of this movie and I hated every single second of it. I'm not a big Russell Brand fan and I thought he was just utterly insufferable and the top hat just made it worse that he wore in that movie. And so when we first were going to do Arthur, I was like, ugh, because I figured the source material would be really bad. But then I started to talk to people who really love movies who said that no, like this is very different. It was an abomination what they did with the Russell Brand film. So I was excited to see like the original.
I'm not anti-Russell Brand. I thought he was great in like Forgetting Sarah Marshall. I think he's fantastic in that movie. But Ash, like you, after watching Arthur on a streaming service, I saw the other Arthur next to it. I said, I might as well see the trailer, see if they, what they did to update it. And it looked utterly horrible.
It was awful. Every second, 5 wipes.
Well, let's get to the original Arthur and hit the trailer.
Don't you wish you were Arthur?
Would the more attractive of you please step forward?
It's gonna cost you $100.
Let's make it $200, but I will ask you to simonize my car.
How rich are you?
I wish I had a dime for every dime I have.
Anticipating your condition, I brought you orange juice, coffee, and aspirins. Or do you need to throw up?
Kiss your wife like that?
I'm not married.
Keep smiling. 688-5549.
Usually one must go to a bowling alley to meet a woman of your stature.
I take it this bum will be calling you.
Dad, he's a millionaire.
You have my permission to marry him. Are you a hooker? I forgot. I just thought I was doing great with you.
Will you take my hand?
That would leave you with one. Offer to take my coat.
You don't have a coat.
Well, offer to take my tie.
You're a rich one. How does it feel to have all that money?
Feels great.
A dumb question.
What's so funny now?
I sometimes just think funny things.
What do you do for a living?
I race cars, I play tennis, I fondle women, but I have weekends off and I am my own boss.
Dudley Moore is Arthur.
I know I do.
Don't you wish you were Arthur? Arthur, the most fun money can buy. An Orion Pictures release through Warner Brothers.
Arthur Bach is a spoiled alcoholic in New York City who likes to be driven by chauffeur Bitterman in his Rolls-Royce limousine through Central Park. He is heir to a portion of his family's vast fortune, but only if he marries the upper-class Susan Johnson, the daughter of a business acquaintance of his father. He does not love Susan, but his family feels that she will make him finally grow up.
Okay, so I'm not going to be negative this whole review because I did grow to eventually like Arthur as a character. But when this movie started, I was struggling, guys, because we have had some unlikable characters before, sure, right? But this guy I found just like insufferable. I had so much trouble watching the first maybe about 15 minutes of this movie because I just couldn't stand him. And there's this thing that happens in films that I am not a fan of. I don't know if you guys are with me on this, but it's like stage drunk acting. It's like you would see in a play the way people over exaggerate being drunk. And they have to do that when you're in a theater because they're on a stage. But some actors, like what Dudley Moore is doing in these first 15 minutes, he's doing stage drunk. He's doing this really over exaggerated version of being drunk that like nobody actually is in real life. And it isn't funny. And so I was just rolling my eyes going, okay, well, maybe the Russell Brand film was true to source material because I didn't like him at all. And then I became really relieved when we finally get out of that and into the sight gags, like him on his little throne, him in that giant bathtub. Like those are the moments that it starts to get charming. But until then, I was struggling.
Yeah, this movie was like reefer madness for Scotch. Like they should show this movie to every teenager and be like, don't drink. This is what you'll look like out there. You're going to go crazy. But there is a payoff because when you later see Arthur at his best, you realize that the little gem of a man is buried in Arthur at his worst. Like there are moments of him that shine through when he's drunk. Severely drunk and reckless Arthur is just a monstrously amplified version of charming Arthur. I think we all know people just like this who are splendid one-on-one by day, and then you see them at a party or out at night, and they're absolutely wretched.
There is no level of growth or development that could make Arthur even just tolerable. He is the worst. That laugh is annoying and fake, like you said, Ash. I always download audio clips for our soundboard. I downloaded Arthur's laugh. I listened to it once, and I said, I'm not playing that. It is so, he laughs like the Joker. He laughs at himself. He then says, isn't that funny? Then laughs again. Everyone is looking at him like he's an idiot, and he's condescending. He talks to the normal people out in the street like they're beneath him, which they are. But when he takes that girl to dinner, the hooker, the prostitute, and she says, yeah, I remember I was raped by my father at 12 and my mom died at 6. And Arthur is condescending and kind of laughing at her even then.
Yeah, a proposal to get through the first 15 minutes of this movie, everybody, is just play an Arthur drinking game. Scotch only, naturally. Just get yourself a big glass of scotch. Do one sip every time Arthur drinks. One sip every time Dudley Moore does that awful cackle that Big D was talking about. And a sip anytime anybody says Bitterman. You'll probably be passed out before you even meet Susan. And you'll be enjoying the movie a lot more.
So I want to propose a different drinking game.
Okay.
You start off before you hit play and drink half of the bottle. Then you press play, and there'll be a good chance you won't make it past the intro credits. This will save you a lot of time. You'll start hearing the song playing, you'll doze off, and you'll be happy because other than Hobson, there is no other reason to watch at least this first half of the movie.
The danger of this, though, is that if you drink a half a bottle of scotch and then you play Christopher Cross, your home decor will result in what we had in like 1992. Like all of our parents decorated our houses that way because they were drinking scotch and listening to Christopher Cross.
Agreed. Lots of fruit and roosters down in New Orleans.
So many roosters.
So many fucking roosters.
But I remember as a kid watching this and thinking that Hobson's joke when Arthur walks out of the room and says, maybe I should wash your dick, you little shit. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard. I'd never heard somebody talking about washing somebody else's dick or little prick. It was funny. And I know that Hobson condescends to everybody, especially Arthur. I'll tolerate it. When they're in the office at his dad and he says, here, read this. There's pictures in it. Lower your voice. Sit up. We'll get ice cream later. And he lights up Linda also. He says when they meet her shoplifting, he says, I usually have to go to a bowling alley to meet a woman of your caliber. And even though he's condescending the same way Arthur is, in his way, it's kind of a loving British way. It's like the British can say terrible, mean, hurtful things, and it's somewhat endearing. Hobson is a no shit type of guy, and I love and respect the man, and he is the reason I stuck with this film.
Hobson is played by John Gielgud, as Ash mentioned, who basically is the caliber of Laurence Olivier when it comes to British theater. And in the 80s, we had this exceptional opportunity to see some of these amazing actors do comedy roles and simple side roles that absolutely blew us away. And just the quality of these actors, again, I know we sound like a broken record on this, but it blows my mind.
I also really love, though, that he plays this character that I feel like was really unique for the 80s and 90s, which is like the butler rich kid character. And I started thinking, like, because I was like, okay, well, this is like obviously like Bruce Wayne and Alfred, but it's repeated over and over again, like a movie like Richie Rich and his butler and like First Kid. And, you know, it happened so many different times. And this one, in my opinion, is the one that is done the best. And it's because of John Gielgud. It's because you know that he tolerates him, but there's a toleration that comes with like true like adoration and love that he has for him. And he's really the emotional core of this movie that could feel really kind of just like empty and kind of like a whatever comedy. He's the anchor for that. And I think to your point, Gene, it's because he's such a good actor. Like he's just such a high quality actor that you can't help but, you know, love him and think that it's a more dynamic film than it probably is otherwise.
Eat your heart out, Michael Caine.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I want to talk about before we pass this intro, the song. I've never seen, or at least don't remember, the beginning of a movie coming up and they slap up there, theme by Christopher Cross. I've never seen that's a song being so prominently placed in the beginning of a film. And then, Gene, you revealed to me that this was a song specially written for the movie.
Yeah, I thought as a guy who always points out that a song has the plot of the movie in the lyrics, that you would have noticed that, yeah, the second verse of this song, I mean, everyone knows that when you get caught between the moon and New York City, but it's Arthur, he does as he pleases. All of his life is master's toys. Deep in his heart, he's just a boy. How did you not notice that?
Because I've never got, maybe I was dozing off, but I've never gotten past the first verse.
It was the half of the bottle. If you hadn't drank the half of the bottle, you would have paid more attention.
Yeah, I would have.
No, this song gives me all the warm fuzzies. During a shopping trip in Manhattan, accompanied by his valet, Hobson, Arthur witnesses a young woman, Linda Marolla, shoplifting a necktie. He intercedes with the store security guard on her behalf and later asks her for a date. Despite his attraction to her, Arthur remains pressured by his family to marry Susan. Arthur is an American film set in New York City. But the comedy is very English in the vein of Withnail and I. There's this thing the English were doing in the 80s that most American filmmakers didn't touch until much later, until we got into like Austin Powers. And they didn't use it very generously until essentially the Marvel Cinematic Universe was established. But British films in the 80s, they would take a character and have them deliver a seemingly obvious and simple statement. And then they would keep going with it and elucidate on that until they got into some really odd specific detail. And Arthur does this a bunch, and it makes me laugh every time. Like when he says, you know, poor drunks do not fall in love. Poor drunks have very few teeth. They freeze to death in the summer. And it's absurd and so English and so good. And it made me forget that this is an American movie.
But Dudley Moore is a very British actor, comedian, musician, composer. The movie does not even attempt to explain his accent. No other member of the family has a British accent. Why? So I'm waiting for somebody to mention, you know, how much time Arthur spent studying abroad, or their family has some kind of is royalty in the UK. But they took the Arnold Schwarzenegger approach. Just never address it. You know, Arnold's like, I'm part of the US military. You know, nobody says, hey, where are you from? Just Arthur, okay. He speaks like he's British. Maybe it's just part of his eccentricity.
I think it's established because he was raised by Hobson.
Yeah.
Hobson's got an accent. Arthur's got an accent.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It wasn't like a Madonna effect where like he's rich and he just starts talking with a random English accent. I think it's because Hobson's his dad.
Oh, so maybe that's even sadder that he really did not have much interaction with anybody outside of Hobson.
Yeah.
God, maybe I'm the dick in this story.
Well, again, if you hadn't drank the half a bottle, you would have caught these nuances, Big T. But I'll tell you, somebody who's not British but has an amazing accent in this movie is Liza Minnelli. She is incredible. I am the biggest Liza Minnelli fan. I have loved her since the first time I saw Cabaret. I love everything about her. I think she is the most interesting face that has ever existed, that has been a face on a human body. I think she's charming. I think she's sexy. And that scene where she's stolen the tie and they're on that street corner and the cop is there, well, the security guard is there, and they start playing off each other, she and Dudley Moore. I was super into this movie because like her energy, her delivery, like this lady is a goddess.
As a Arrested Development fan, Liza will always be Lucille Ostero to me. But holy crap, was she a babe in 1981. I missed this entire phase of Minnelli, and I am here for it. She looks great, and those outfits are hot.
Mm-hmm.
What copy of the movie did you guys get? I don't think it was the same one I got.
The one that was free on Prime.
Did you have like the 8K Liza Minnelli cut? What was it?
That was Amazon Prime Video.
Yeah.
Was this like the James Cameron like redigitized like version? Hot Gordon? No.
Oh,
no.
yeah.
No, I would think you're being generous. You're being generous because she's a talented performer, and you're kind of injecting that into your view of her physically. Whatever. She's not a hideous woman. She's Liza. But as a previous semi-professional shoplifter all the way up through college, I need to tell you, wearing a yellow jacket, red cowboy hat, and red scarf, that is not the way to blend in. You need to like look like another shopper. Don't do that. That's my hot take. You'll get away with it much, much easier. But my take on Liza, watching this, all I could picture was all of the Liza drag impersonations I've seen since. And the fact that I think Lady Gaga is constantly channeling her inner Liza Minnelli. She feels very similar.
Lady Gaga is fine, but Lady Gaga will never be anything near Liza Minnelli. And like, even like to this day, I mean, Gene mentioned Arrested Development. I mean, as Lucille too, she still looks great in that show. Like she looks amazing and she's in her 70s. Like she is a beautiful woman. And I would say to your point, Big D, she's in New York. You absolutely wear the yellow jacket and the red cowboy hat. Just maybe don't shoplift at Bergdorf Goodman. Like go shoplift at Macy's.
Cowboy hat aside, Big D, go back and see the scene where she's in the kitchen at her apartment. She's got this red and blue horizontal striped top with like the red bandana tied around her neck and just like this little blue belt. And her figure in that striped shirt and her bangs and the little sideburny thing she's got going on. I mean, just amazing. Or if you want to get super hot, she's got this red Ferrari t-shirt that she puts on during this movie, and like you can see it all.
She's hot.
That face, that body, goddamn.
Okay, I'm going to go back and review this.
Go watch Cabaret.
Or go watch Cabaret.
Like she's sexy in that. I love you, Liza.
While visiting his grandmother, Martha, Arthur shares his feelings for Linda, but is warned again that he will be disowned if he does not marry Susan. Hobson, who has been more like a father to him than Arthur's real father, realizes that Arthur is beginning to grow up and secretly encourages Linda to attend Arthur's engagement party. Hobson confides in Linda that he senses Arthur loves her, and Linda crashes the party held at the estate of Arthur's father. She and Arthur eventually spend time alone together, which is tracked by both families.
All right, so I want to bring up, because our amazing commissioner talked about the moral of the story, that like money doesn't buy you happiness. And I grew up super like not rich at all in New Orleans. Like we were middle class at best, and that was like at the end of my dad's career. And so when I met my husband and he grew up with real money, I was like, oh, your life must have been so much easier than mine, right? But the longer I've known him, because we've been married now almost 9 years, we've been together over a decade, and the more I'm with him, the more I realize that like you could not pay me to grow up with money the way that he did, because the pressures related to it in certain families are like insurmountable. And it's a gag here that they're trying to make him get married, but like that type type of pressure, that type of expectation like exists in a lot of these families. Like for him, for my husband, like he was given 2 choices for a major, and like he would have been cut off if he hadn't have done those. He every Saturday had to report his grades and accomplishments and like formal meetings, like it was like a resume. At their dinner parties, we come prepared like when I go to a conference on what I've read most recently and like research articles, and it's just disgusting. And so for him, he became a heroin addict because heroin was nicer to him than his parents. Arthur, he becomes an alcoholic. And like that reads really, really true to me because I get Arthur and his desire to be with someone so different than him, like Linda, like my husband who brought home a poor New Orleanian Democrat to his very conservative, wealthy family in St. Louis. I'd pick any day to be middle class or upper middle class and not be upper class. What about you guys? You trade like all this shit for money?
So in the battling campaigns between Dr. Oz and John Fetterman, Dr. Oz said that it's hard to discern significant differences in happiness between someone making $50,000 and $50 million. That's ridiculous. Like if you're only making 50 grand, life can be a little bit difficult, especially you have kids, bills to pay, et cetera. I'm not the poorest member of my family, but I live like I am. Like if someone were to come to my house and go to any of my cousin's house, to be like, okay, he's the one that doesn't have any money. And it's not that I'm cheap. I just lack the imagination to spend money. I don't really understand money that well. And because of that, I don't understand the desire for extreme wealth. So take Arthur's New York, for example, right? We see him going to the nice restaurant and just getting driven around the Rolls Royce. Even if I were a billionaire, I wouldn't want to eat where he eats. That doesn't look like a good time at all. I wouldn't want to shop where he shops. Like there's nothing at Bergdorf Goodman's that I would want to buy. And I wouldn't want to consort with his family. Like those aren't people I would want to hang out with. But that apartment, like I would take that apartment in a heartbeat. It is just my style. The little throne, the bathtub, as you mentioned, all the green and the gold and just cool shit, the choo-choo train and the giant bed. Like, please sign me up for that.
Arthur, at any point, if you're wealthy, you can choose to walk away. I think if you're poor, you cannot choose to walk away and raise yourself to unlimited funds. You're shaking your head. I'm not talking walk away from the expectations, but you could get up and go. Like you can leave. No one's going to physically restrain you.
I'm not at all trying to say that my husband struggled like someone who's making $17K a year because that's ridiculous. But I would say if I could bring him in here, he would tell you that he felt like he never could walk away, which is why he shot drugs in his arms for 10 years.
No, it's difficult to walk away, but you can. It's hard to walk away from money and having that never be an issue.
It wasn't about the money. It was about the name and the expectation. That's what it was. It wasn't about the money because they cut him off from the money pretty early on and all that shit. It was the name.
If you ever wanted to hear us cover House of the Dragon, here's a morsel for you. Yeah. This is House of the Dragon. I mean, it's basically the same thing, right? You're born into a royal lineage, and you can walk away from it any time and go to the free cities and just disappear. But
go to Pentos. But you know who came back?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Daemon Targaryen.
That's right. And Kristen Cole, he offered Rhaenyra the out, and they could have just taken it and lived happily ever after. But she had to go with her duty, just like Arthur.
But House of the Dragon is so much better than this movie. Just making sure that's clear.
I don't know that season finale. Ugh.
I loved it.
Well, we've seen a lot of Arthur-esque movies since 1981, as you mentioned, Ash, Billy Madison and others. And most of them involved like a spoiled brat who doesn't appreciate his riches, or in some cases, even sees his wealth as a burden. This movie is smart in developing Arthur as a character who enjoys being rich. He's fully aware that his money sets him apart from other people in a good way. Like he wants to keep that $750 million. And yes, he spends frivolously, but he likes that he can spend frivolously. I think he considers himself fortunate. And that was a nice twist on the character that I didn't expect.
So David said in his letter that he said, this is, he's searching for love. He wants to find love. I disagree completely. He's found love. And when presented with the option, Arthur clearly chooses the money. When he goes to Martha, Martha says, listen, take the money, get married. She's not fucking around. Keep Susan and then go cheat with the girl from Queens. She's telling him this is what you should do, and he's all on board. He is perfectly willing until Hobson guilts him into it and he gets drunk and rethinks it. But sober Arthur has chosen money. That's his decision.
House of the Dragon. Hobson is later hospitalized, and Arthur rushes to his side, vowing to care for the person who has long cared for him. After several weeks, Hobson dies, and then Arthur, who has been sober the entire time, goes on a drinking binge. On his wedding day, he visits the diner where Linda works and proposes to her. At the church, he jilts Susan, resulting in her abusive father, Bert Johnson, attempting to stab Arthur with a cheese knife, though he is prevented by Martha.
So it's foreshadowed early on. I felt like, at least, it was pretty heavy-handed that Hobson's dying is like is going to die, right? Like that's something that's going to occur in this movie. And their little like Bruce Wayne and Alfred relationship, like I've already said, I think is really precious. But I'll be very honest with you. I was not expecting his death to hit me like in the feels the way that it did. I was really sad for Arthur. And I finally, at this point in the movie, didn't mind that Arthur makes these really shitty choices. Like I get why he chooses to go to drink afterwards. I get his self-destructive mechanisms and, his kind of going back to what he's always known. I don't know about y'all, but like I've shared this before on the pod, like I recently just lost someone for the first time that I really cared about. And like, I wanted to go and just like be in a hole wasted for like weeks. So I can't imagine me having like a normal, like well put together, I was loved as a childhood and feeling that way, how like someone like Arthur would feel if like the one person in the world who didn't just love him, but like the one person in the world who actually liked him. Because there's a big difference between loving and liking. And I tell my kids that all the time. Every day I tell them, I love you for always. I like you for always too, because I want them to know they're liked, because it's so much worse when your parents don't like you. At least for me, like that was really hard with my mom, like not liking me growing up. And so I was surprised by how affected I was by Hobson's death. It made me really sad in what I thought was supposed to be just like a straight comedy.
When people are dying and everybody just goes through the motions that they're supposed to go through, you get some flowers, you get some cards, you go to the hospital, you visit for a couple hours in shifts. It drives me insane. It bothers me so much because it's an exceptional set of circumstances. A person is dying. You should do something exceptional. Like they're still here. Do something exceptional. And Arthur does that when he shows up with the giant cowboy hats and when he reverses the roles of servant and master, he rebuilds a replica of his apartment inside the hospital and becomes Hobson's valet. I was in tears watching this movie. You see that Hobson raised a compassionate and thoughtful man who goes above and beyond. And they do this all without teary speeches. It's not, Michael Caine with his hand shaking saying goodbye. It's just two men relating the way that they relate, speaking and acting in an unspoken language that only the two of them understand with each other. It's so personal. And like you said, Ash, it has a massive emotional impact.
Gene, you're 100% correct. I was surprised at how reserved they were and how they played it. Hobson dying, there is no last moment. There's no hand holding. There's no last breath and the monitors start going off. No tears. Thankfully, they don't even show us Hobson's funeral. They just show Arthur making the last move on the chessboard. He locks the door and he walks away respectfully, dignified. And I think this is how Hobson would have wanted to go out and to be remembered. But somebody we haven't talked about a lot in the podcast so far, I think we need to discuss right now is Susan. Because Susan, the build up to her, as they're describing her, she is this hag. She can't cook a chicken. Basically, she's ugly unless you catch her in the right light. To me, Susan, she's wealthy. Yes, she's entitled. She's a bit vapid. But honestly, she seems to love Arthur. She's worried about him being alone like Hobson was. I believe if he had married her, she would have stuck with him. She would have made him a better man because she loves him. And I thought it was kind of wrong that the movie continued to just bag on her when she sits there and takes the public disrespect, the embarrassment that Arthur brings on. I think she was better looking than Liza. I don't think she deserved being mocked and the marriage that she's being wheeled into.
She is no Liza, right? Like she's totally like vanilla and plain and like is what she is. And to go back to Gene's very, I think, brilliant House of the Dragon reference here, like this is House of the Dragon. She's doing her duty, right? Like she's coming in, she's marrying her cousin. I know they're not really cousins, but you know what I mean? She's coming in, she's doing what she's supposed to do for the good of the family. And she's loving who her family tells her to love. Now, do I think that she deserves like all the ire and all the making fun? No, I think she's just is what she is, and she's not super smart and just is kind of there. I mean, Arthur would have never been happy with somebody like Susan.
Oh, he wouldn't have. But I want to ask you both, what did you think of the bronze bitch, Damon's first wife? Physically.
She's smoking hot.
Oh, I agree. Ash?
I mean, yeah, she was fine. Worthy of Damon. I don't know, but
Worthy of Damon. He's a shitbag.
oh, but he's so hot.
You think Matt Smith is hot?
It's the bad boy.
You gotta nope. Y'all have to remember, I'm a massive Whovian. We don't ever talk about Doctor Who on here because neither of you watched it. He is the 11th Doctor, and I love him with every part of me, and I love him in everything he's in, and I think he's sexy as fuck. And yes, as Damon, I think he's real sexy. He's got some BDE going on for show.
Gene, I've made the connection. I got to do a video of Damon flying his dragon to Cool Rider. I want a cool rider. As Damon's got, that's what she likes. She likes the bad boy biker, the outlaw.
I don't like
whether
the
it's a
bad
motorcycle
boy.
or dragon. Ash just gets excited.
I mean, y'all have seen my husband. He looks like an amalgam between Matt Smith and Jeff Goldblum. Like if Jeff Goldblum and Matt Smith and Adam Driver had like a threesome and had a baby, that's what Tom looks like.
Well, you like BDE.
So yeah, he's like a third of what I find super sexy.
You like BDE. That's the most important thing.
I do like big dick energy. I do. And he has it and he's sexy. But yes, I think that she was a pretty woman and did not deserve to be crushed by a horse. No.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Susan. I was like, what?
Jade's thinking he missed a scene in the stable. What happened in the stable? I don't remember.
It's back to House of the Dragon here. I was trying to give your question its due. No. And Susan didn't either. She also didn't deserve to be crushed by a horse or made fun of, but she's no Liza Minnelli.
I mean, that's the problem I had with this movie is I enjoyed the romance between Arthur and Linda, but they were so mean to Susan. I don't mean just the movie, but the two of them specifically. Like Susan is clueless. She is delusional, but that doesn't justify making her the punchline of their relationship. And as I understand it, the new remake of Arthur, she's a little more savvy. She's kind of in on it, and that's a different spin on the character. But this character, she's not a bad person. And Arthur and Linda con her into thinking that Linda has a family in need. Arthur abandons her on her fucking wedding day. Like, it's cruel. It makes him a very unlikable person after all that work he did with Hobson.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that is the one thing that works in the remake is there's some ambition there with Susan. Like, she knows what she's getting, and she's getting that $750 million, right? It's a paycheck when she marries him. And she's wealthy in her own right, but he's like real money, right? And so I think that, there's some ambition there. It's very Succession with like the daughter that gets married and the guy that she marries. He knows what he's getting into with her.
A wounded Arthur announces in the church that there will be no wedding, then passes out soon after. Later, Linda attends to his wounds and discusses living a life of poverty. A horrified Martha tells Arthur that he can have his fortune because no Bach has ever been working class. Arthur declines, but at the last minute, he talks privately to Martha. When he returns to Linda's side, he tells her that he declined again. Martha's dinner invitation, he means, but he did accept $750 million. Arthur's pleased chauffeur Bitterman drives the couple through Central Park. So watching 80s movies set in New York is always bittersweet for me as a Queens boy. I see the city as it was when I was born, and it looks just perfect to me. Then I remember that it doesn't look like that anymore. Most of the bodegas that I liked wandering through are now chain stores, or even worse, like GoPuff delivery terminals with their windows all blacked out. The streets have been turned into pedestrian malls and tourist traps, and the storefronts have lost their character. They've become homogenized. You see Home Depots and Starbucks everywhere. But one thing that stayed pretty consistent since my childhood is Central Park. Every time I go back, it's pretty much the same. And I smiled when I discovered that Arthur, this multimillionaire, his favorite activity is to drink while riding through the park. It's a great way to spend an afternoon. I can't argue with it.
So, Gene, I think what you're doing is you're romanticizing a memory. I do this all the time when people ask about the military, and I can only have fond memories of it. But when I sit down and actually break it down, no, those fond memories are not wholly accurate. New York in the late 70s and 80s, that shit there was crime, corruption. Yes, you like the eccentric side, but it was a dark, shitty place, burned out buildings, drugs, the crime rate was high. You think it's like different? Yes, but any day I will take the safe New York City the way it is today.
I'm not talking. My mom wasn't pushing my stroller through fucking Bed-Stuy. I was in Forest Hills with the occasional trip to Central Park. It was beautiful. You got your bagels. You went to the shoe store.
Okay, so you want the
I was
safe,
in a onesie. Fuck.
You want the green zone version of 70s and 80s New York City.
But that's gone.
Yeah. Okay. But as we get to the end of the movie here, Gene, I have to close out by kind of reviewing everything that's happened and Arthur's development as a character. We reached the end. Arthur's had some big changes in his life. He's got to learn responsibility. It's the death of Hobson. Like you said, Hobson had taught him some deep lessons about life and love. But you asked the question, Gene, what has he learned? He's gotten to this point now. He's chosen. He's gonna take love. But then he also conveniently wants the money. He wants the girl. He gets hammered after Hobson's death. He doesn't seem to have changed. I anticipate, I've not seen, I know there's an Arthur 2, spoiler alert. I'm going to anticipate it doesn't go well. And he doesn't seem to be a man who has changed much.
Why does he have to learn anything? I think this is a rather capitalist old man view of the world, Big D. As Arthur says, everyone who drinks is not a poet. His lot in life is to be ultra rich man in love who drinks a lot and acts like a child. And I think that's okay.
Do you expect him to give up all that money? Is that what Hobson would have wanted? I don't think Hobson ever wanted him to be poor or to, not have the money he's used to growing up with. I think he wanted him to have the money, but be a decent human and be able to stand on his own. I don't think the intention was ever for him to just, walk away. Who walks away from $750 million? Nobody. None of us in this room would do that.
Just Dr. Oz.
Just Dr. Oz.
Vote for Fetterman. Now's the time in the podcast we give our wipe scores for Arthur. Our wipe score is our way of telling you how many wipes this movie takes to get our respective butts. 0 wipes is a perfect movie. It is drunken driving across the Isle of Manhattan with 0 consequences. And 5 wipes is an absolute disaster of a film. It is being stabbed on your wedding day by a knife that was pulled from a hunk of cheese. Ash, we'll start with you. What is your wipe score for Arthur?
So I get why this movie's famous. It's super cute. I thought parts of it were funny. I think Liza is amazing. And surprisingly, there was some emotional resonance to it as well. Now, was it perfect? No, I didn't think it was funny throughout. There were times when I thought Arthur was really charming, but there were times when I really did find him insufferable. But I did think it was good. And for me, it's perfectly average. It's a 2.5, perfectly average movie for me.
I'm going to come in a little bit lower than that, Ash. Parts of this movie weren't initially enjoyable, like the beginning, but each one had a payoff. Dudley Moore was great. Liza Minnelli was great. Hobson was exemplary. And the theme song was everything that First Blood's Long Road wasn't. Yeah. We often pan songs that explain the plot, Big D, but Arthur's theme is too pretty to criticize. It's a beautiful fucking song. It reminds me of riding around in my uncle's Cadillac in 80s Queens. Such a beautiful time to be alive, even if there was crime and burning trash cans or whatever over where Big D lived. So I'm going to go with 1.5 wipes.
For me, I think I'm going to agree with Ash. I think this is a 2.5 wipe movie. I think it's average. I think there's some things that work, some things that don't. Like you said, Gene, the theme song, the performances, I think are great. It's just a different time. This passed for a very funny comedy for adults to take their 8-year-old in 1981, but it was average. I don't think it was exceptional. I'm scared. I think part 2, I feel like it would be a disaster, but this one, it's an average movie.
Yeah, Arthur 2 on the rocks is not great.
Does he stay sober?
No. 2.5 wipes from Big D and Ash, 1.5 wipes from me. That comes out to an average wipe score of 2.16 repeating wipes for 1981's Arthur.
So Gene, with a score of 2.16 repeating wipes, that now ties us in the 143 spot with Home Alone, Major Leagues, The Goonies, Under Siege, The Sandlot, From Dusk Till Dawn, The Usual Suspects, A League of Their Own, and The Wedding Singer. I don't know if that seems right.
I think it's fine. The Usual Suspects, I think, is much better, but I get that hasn't aged as well as I would like for it to.
Awful, awful outfits.
Yeah.
The outfits in Arthur were much better. Thank you, David, for your commission. And speaking of commissions, we have some letters we'd like to get through this week, starting out with one from Eric.
When Eric wrote in and said, Chat Crew, I have heard each one of you express how you appreciate hearing about the positive impact that you have made in the lives of many of your listeners. After hearing so many others express how much your podcast means to them, I decided it was finally time for me to properly pay up with a commission and express my gratitude. Like many other listeners, I began listening to Shat at the tail end of Game of Thrones Season 8 podcast. I truly enjoyed Big D and Jean's analysis as the show unfolded, and I will occasionally listen to an old episode to hear the remarkable, oftentimes outlandish predictions on how the series would end. We all got it wrong, but you made the show even more enjoyable. Soon after GOT ended in the summer of 2019, my daughter approached me about their wish that I divorce their mom because of her addiction to opioids. It was the hardest time in my life as I navigated the family court system for nearly 2 years in an effort to convince a judge that I should be the primary custodial parent because it was in the best interest of my girls. It took amazing energy, patience, and every financial resource I had to make it happen. There were days that I would sit down to work on my computer and would have a hard time drafting a simple email. I couldn't sleep or eat. Did I mention it was COVID? Wow. A silver lining, you do learn many things about yourself through such a challenging time, particularly on how to cope with stress and anxiety. The first thing I learned was the power of walking, simply walking, an activity that I continue to do consistently to this day. The second thing I learned was the power of listening paired with the power of walking, with AirPods in place, which is where you come in. I'm not sure how many miles or hours I logged in listening to Big D and Jean and eventually Ash banter back and forth about so many things that were important in my youth. I say things instead of movies because, to be honest, the movies you review are simply a reflection. What an amazing time to grow up, and it was. And I believe that your podcast is meaningful, not because you review movies from the 80s and 90s, but because you tell your personal, relatable stories through talking about these movies. We, the audience, identify much more with who each of you is as an interesting human being, rather than the fictional characters you review from long ago. Your trio's chemistry, humor, and genuine conversations are the reasons that I and so many others listen week after week. I thank you for the positive energy that brought me during a dark time, and it truly helped me. With all of this in mind, the movie I want to commission this week is completely up to you. I simply want to hear the three of you talk about it. Thank you, Eric. I'll Venmo you the money tonight. Thanks again.
Wow, that's so much freedom. First of all, Eric, thank you so much for the kind words. I think you summed up exactly what we try to do here. This podcast started off as a way to tell people whether the movies we loved when we were growing up really hold up. And I think that it's really evolved into movies giving us a platform to have genuine conversations about what we're going through, what we're watching. But Big D, Ash, is there something that we're totally overdue to do that hasn't been commissioned yet?
Well, I think we need to put some thought into this. We can't rush this. This has to be right. This has to feel right.
So, Eric, what I propose is that we take a week until the next episode. We're going to talk it over and come back with an announcement of what movie we're doing for you. But thank you again for the kind words. And I hope we can do something that is befitting your commission.
And let me just say, my friend, the opioid thing, I totally get. And that's a lot. And if our podcast brought you any relief during that with your family, that makes my heart even happier, because that can be such a black hole to climb out of. And I'm just going to throw it out there. We should do Pump Up the Volume. I've already decided. So in that 5 seconds, it should be Pump Up the Volume.
I think that's already on the schedule.
Then it shouldn't be that. And it should be Wayne's World too. So up next, we have one from Sam in Lake Arrowhead, California. And Sam writes in, "Hi guys, I've written 3 or 4 times before and haven't heard anything. So I'm hoping the 4th to 5th time is the charm. I've been a fan of Shat the Movies for almost 2 years now. I suffer through all the raspy, I'm terrible at sex, and I'll let all my podcast listeners know it, Roger episodes, and feel like you're honestly part of my kitchen staff. I'm the chef and co-owner of a restaurant in Lake Arrowhead, California. Shout out to Stone Creek Bistro, and often listen to your pod while prepping for the evening's dinner service. It's high time I pay for my own commission. I'm not sure which one to ask though, so I'm giving you the option. The first is Sleepers, which came out in 1996. The second, Cabin Boy, which came out in 1994. Sure, Chris Elliott isn't everybody's cup of tea, but holy shit, is this movie incredible. Get a life, anybody? Number 3, Captain Ron. 1993 has a perfectly generic family comedy with boobs with Kurt Russell and Martin Short. Who knew Snake Plissken was also a boat captain? 4, Amelie, 2001. Not a 90s movie, but since you've done 3 or 4 1970s movies, why not ask? It's beautiful. It really is. Audrey Tattoo is a goddess, and I can watch this at the drop of a hat. That's all. Back to work, hoping this time somebody will write me back. Peace, love, and Warren Zevon. Gene, just so goddamn wrong.
Sam, as an olive branch, last night before going out, had a couple drinks and put on Werewolf of London and sang along with it, complete with all the awoos until the dogs got pissed at me. So there is one Warren Zevon song that I can appreciate. My vote on this one, I know Ash is going to say Amelie, but for me, I am a massive Cabin Boy fan. David Letterman's cameo in it is absolutely amazing. Sharky is absolutely incredible. These pipes are clean. Like, that movie just made me laugh so much as a kid, and I would love to do Cabin Boy.
Why are you assuming I'm going to say Amelie?
Would you choose Amelie out of these four?
Yeah.
Of course you would.
But I'm also fine with Cabin Boy or Captain Ron or Sleepers. Sleepers is great, but man, Sleepers is fucking depressing.
Would you like to buy a monkey?
You see, for me, immediately, Captain Ron just made me smile, thinking of the poster with Kurt Russell. But, Gene, your excitement for Cabin Boy and Ash, the fact that you also like Cabin Boy, I'd go with Cabin Boy for you guys.
Let's do it.
All right, Cabin Boy it is.
Cabin Boy it is.
Was that Christmas 2023?
2023. Maybe like, let's just say 4th of July, 2024.
Well, our next one continues the commission request, and this one comes from Sean. And Sean says, "Hey, Shat Crew, I'm looking forward to my commission of Flash Gordon in January. I just finished listening to your last episode, Defending Your Life, and Ash mentioned Death Becomes Her and asked if someone would commission it. Count me in. I would love to. It's one of my partner's favorite movies and one he puts on at least once per week. And we both fucking love Meryl Streep. Let me know if you approve. I'll send the commission money as soon as I hear back from you. Wishing each of you my very best, Sean." I am so excited, Sean. This is such a good movie.
So the good news is Sean came through. Death Becomes Her is on the schedule.
Oh, so good.
I haven't seen it since it came out, so this should be one of those like absolute tests of Shat.
Oh, I rewatched it just a couple months ago and it's still just utterly glorious. So, well, the next one comes from Ray, who's writing in about Vision Quest. And he says, "Hey guys, love the podcast. I hadn't seen the movie Vision Quest until recently, but was 15 at the time this movie was released. I loved watching it several times since I discovered it. A question I had that I've never seen anyone talk about was this. When Loudon gets on the back of Cooch's bike, he comments on his new shoes. The shoes were clearly new and meant to be noticed by the audience. Earlier in the film, when Loudon was hit on in the hotel room, the salesman tells Loudon that he sells wrestling shoes. The camera actually pans down to the box of shoes near the bed on the floor. It seems implied that Loudon returned the hotel room. Loudon was clearly intrigued by the dude in the hotel room when they showed him peek back in that direction before getting on the elevator. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks, Ray."
Wow, since neither of you were on this cast.
Yeah, I want to know more about
this. And it was Roger, myself, and we also had professional wrestler QT Marshall was on that episode. I remember there was some questions about, and again, I'm reaching here in my memory of Loudon's sexuality. Maybe it was in some, director's cut version of it, but I wouldn't be surprised. Why not?
Yeah, let's not conflate your sexuality with what you're willing to do for wrestling shoes. Those are two very different things.
Yes, he was not Arthur. He was not a man of means. He did not have like unlimited wrestling shoes and tights and those ear guards. Maybe you do what you got to do to take it to the next level. Go on that vision quest.
Well, the next one we have comes from Mick Mills about Dark City. And they say, Roger Ebert did a DVD commentary track on Dark City that is 100 times more interesting than your podcast episode. I gave you all a 1 star on Spotify. Suck it, bitches.
I forgot we were on Spotify, so suck it, bitch. No, Mick, I don't. I thought Dark City was one of our better episodes. I really enjoyed that one.
No, I was like an anchor around the neck of this podcast. I was coming off of the cruise and I had damaged some brain cells. I could not function a coherent sentence. I was struggling to keep up. I shortchanged the movie, not as bad as Blade Runner, but any knock on us, that 1 star, that's mine. I deserve that one.
I thought it was great. I thought we did a great job. And I'm sure we did get a 1 star review on Spotify. So it's fine.
I didn't know you could even review things on Spotify. This is news to me.
Well, just as long as you don't say Apple iTunes, it's fine. All right, our second to last one comes from Phoebes, who asks, how do I commission a movie? And Phoebes says, Shat Crew, y'all are absolutely incredible. I just want to know how to commission a movie. Is there a link on your site or something? Although I do want to commission a pretty shit movie, so no worries if you don't want to tell me. All my love and admiration, Phoebes.
So Phoebes, yes, you go to shatpod.com and you'll find up top a support link. And that gives you the many ways that you could support us, whether it's PayPal, Venmo. It walks you through the commission process about just requesting the film, checking the schedule, how to make donations, how to set up something reoccurring, how to buy merch, or buying through our Amazon affiliate link. So that's on shatpod.com/support. And we look forward to hearing from you.
And don't worry if it's a shit movie, because those are sometimes the best ones.
Yeah.
I hope it is a shit movie. Those are by far our best pods. When it's a really great movie and we just love all over it, it's a lot less interesting.
I always think of Robot Jocks. Or Robo Jocks. I love that episode.
Yeah. Well, and our last one for tonight comes from Rob F., and he's writing in about Gattaca. Rob says, Dear Shat Crew, we often hear listeners call or write in and reference how your pod has influenced them during good times, bad times, and most recently during pandemic times. The pod has been a constant for me personally throughout all of it, and I thank you. That is thanks to all past, present, and even guest hosts. No favorites here. For giving us these weekly episodes to enjoy and to escape, it's only appropriate for me to therefore give back after all this time, now that you've recorded over a half of a decade of free entertainment for us. I'm a sucker for 80s and 90s nostalgia content, which is how I found your pod back in 2016, and I've listened to every episode since, often multiple times. Movies in particular connect me viscerally to fond memories, friends and family from the past, and most specifically to my father, whom I lost over 10 years ago, which is why I'm writing in today. My dad was a truly special person, kind, warm-hearted, charitable, and effortlessly brilliant. While he left an outsized impact on countless lives as a physician, community leader, and family patriarch, he wasn't known for having good taste in film. This proved to be an enduring and, dare I say, eminently charming part of his persona for each and every person who knew him well. However, there were a handful of exceptions, and I'd like to commission one of those films today. Gattaca, the 1997 science fiction crime and noir film starring Ethan Hawke, Uma Thurman, Jude Law, and Tony Shalhoub. I still recall when he recommended the film to me when I was in college. He believed the story arc of Ethan Hawke's character offered profound inspiration to a young person like me who was pursuing a path towards individual identity, a sense of belonging, and overall meaning in life. I was struck back then, as I am now, by one particular line Ethan Hawke's character delivers during the climactic scene when he literally swims against the tide, but in which he is speaking metaphorically to his brother, when answering how he conquered an innate set of genetically engineered differences and obstacles working against him in his own dystopian world. You want to know how I did it? This is how I did it. Anton, I never saved anything for the swim back. Giving everything he could to everyone and everyone around him. I can't think of a better way to define my father and his relentless commitment to bettering the world one day at a time. It's totally understood if the film doesn't hold up well, or if you simply don't enjoy it for any of a number of bona fide reasons. In fact, it might make even more sense if the film doesn't receive a strong score, since it would just further demonstrate how the proverbial apple didn't fall too far from the tree. Please let me know how to arrange payment for the commission should you wish to accept it. Thanks again, Rob F.
So Rob and I actually went back and forth with emails. He has commissioned it, so it's on the schedule. But Rob, an email, I think, a couple before, it said how it's the stories of us. And that's what drives people to listen to the podcast. Hearing from listeners like Rob and how a movie impacted his relationship with his father, and even to today, I think about that with my daughter. And it's the reason I love doing the podcast and love hearing from our listeners, because those stories, to me, are even more enjoyable and more moving than a lot of the films we do.
On a much more superficial level, Rob, I'm just really excited to flush my memory of what Jude Law looks like now and go back to 1997 Jude Law, when he was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. So I appreciate this commission more than you know.
Also, put Ethan Hawke in there, because this was like prime Ethan Hawke years. And Gattaca's awesome, Rob. It's an awesome fucking movie.
Yeah, no shame in this commission. Well, thank you to everyone who wrote in with their letters. If you'd like to write to us, you can write us hosts@shatthemovies.com or visit our website at shatpod.com and use the SpeakPipe feature to leave us a voicemail. We love hearing your voices. Big D, what do we have coming up next week?
Jane, next week, Hando and Davey are the leaders of a racist young gang who spend their nights attacking Asian immigrants in a rough section of Melbourne. On the run after losing badly in a fight against the new Vietnamese owners of their local pub, the pair hook up with the teenage junkie Gabe, who suggests robbing a mansion with a rich and abusive father. But the girl's presence begins to drive a wedge between the lifelong friends. This was commissioned by Davey C. Orsi. It was released in 1993, and this will be a bloody good time.
and suddenly won an awesome blossom, a little surf and turf. That's amazing. Listen, if you're going to go into a neo-Nazi film, the best way to do it is
with a blooming onion,
with an authentic accent. Thanks, Big D. Thank you, Daniel C. Aussie, for commissioning our upcoming film. And thank you, David, for commissioning Arthur. Thank you to all the commissioners who make this podcast possible and everybody who wrote in. That concludes this week's episode of Shat The Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat The Movies. You can email us, host@shatthemovies.com. Support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, buying our merch, or commissioning your own movie. Find all information by visiting our website, shatpod.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review TV series such as Lovecraft Country, Westworld, True Detective, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, and Watchmen. Find all information on our website, shatpod.com/TV. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by Apple Podcasts, please leave a 5-star review. That helps the podcast grow. On behalf of my co-host, Ash and Big D, I'm Gene Lyons. Join us next week for the following movie.
Only one movie has been acclaimed as one of the most brilliant, provocative, and truly exciting entertainment experiences since Mad Max and A Clockwork Orange. The movie is called Romper Stomper. This movie is rated R. Romper Stomper has been honoured with 9 Australian Film Award nominations, including Best Film, Best Director, and Best Actor. Basic Instinct, Romper Stomper will excite, disturb, and challenge you. And yet Romper Stomper is totally unlike what you may have seen before. Enjoy the difference. Experience Romper Stomper.